welcome back. I'm once again Scott Sturgeon with the Practice Management Group. And for our segment today, or for this portion of the class, I have Jaden Winberg. He's the Vice President of the Trust and Estate Planning Group here at Mariner Wealth Advisors. Jaden, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me.
Hey, thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Jaden Winberg. I lead Mariner's Trust and Estate Services Group. And we were created, frankly, as you all know, or as you're learning throughout this process, our wealth advisors build a very close relationship with their clients over a number of years, typically. And being in the high net worth, ultra high net worth segment, trusts are invariably part of those clients' estate plans. And so naturally, they were looking for a solution in terms of something to ensure that that advisor stays involved through that next generation of clients, through their children, grandchildren, et cetera. And so we created the trust company to provide that service for our clients as a function of that demand. And really, we're designed to be a private trust company offering with a highly personalized level of service. And most importantly, obviously, is the continuity of the relationship with that wealth advisor through that next generation of clients. A couple things that are unique about us. One is we are not a profit center for Mariner. So Marty is adamant that we are considered an added service for our clients and for the advisors. And so I'll touch on our fee schedule here in a moment, but it's a very competitive, really kind of a break-even fee on the trustee side. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind with Mariner Trust Company is we, while we're a separate entity from a regulatory and operations standpoint, we don't take over that relationship when we begin serving as trustee. It is truly set up so that the continuity of the relationship remains with that wealth advisor. And so along those same lines, while we are set up to be a third-party trust administrator, we actually really are captive to Mariner. So we only provide corporate trustee services to Mariner clients and our advisors. So we're not out trying to get trust business from Northern or places outside the organization.
Right.
So it allows us to keep that very, again, personalized service level and private trust company offering. We don't manage investments, so that continues to be done by Mariner Wealth through what we call a directed trust model. And I can touch on that later on during our conversation, but it allows us to bifurcate those roles. So Mariner Trust Company handles things like discretionary distributions, filing of tax returns, making sure statements are being provided to the appropriate parties, things like that.
Gotcha.
The investment management, the financial planning for those trust assets continues to be done by Mariner Wealth Advisor and their team. With that said, we are capable of handling unique assets. And so things like commercial real estate, oil and gas interest, personal residences, things like that are often in our clients' trust accounts, we are capable of managing those. And so we're not expecting a wealth advisor to be an expert on those areas, but marketable securities and things like that are continuing to be done through the wealth advisor and the wealth team. So we're a South Dakota Trust Company, which is a wonderful thing if we need it. I like to say you've got to be chartered somewhere, and so why not be in the best location you can be? And so when we created the trust company back in 2013, we did a survey, frankly, of all the states and the various charters, and decided that South Dakota made the most sense for our clients and for our trust company. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm happy to talk to. If you have further questions and things, we can spend some more time on the benefits of South Dakota. But again, it's something when we need it. It is a great jurisdiction for us and can provide a whole host of benefits for our clients.
Definitely.
So finally, again, just to reiterate, we only provide this service for Mariner clients. And so what that means is the investments, things like that would, for that trust at least, not necessarily the client's entire investment portfolio, but all those trust assets, in order for us to serve as trustee, need to be housed at Mariner Wealth Advisors.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
In terms of location, so I'm in the Overland Park office, which is obviously, as everybody knows, is the headquarters of Mariner. I'm here, and then Nick Page, who is our senior trust officer, sits with me here in Overland Park. And then we have a team of folks in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, who do our operations and compliance. The wealth advisors may or may not interact much with them, just kind of depending on how that relationship develops. Mm-hmm. I've been in the business 13 years, going on 14. I'm an attorney, have a master's in tax laws, my education background. Prior to coming to Mariner, trust company in 2013 to help start and implement the trust company. I spent about 9 years with a large bank trust group here headquartered here in Kansas City. And then Nick Page, again, our senior trust officer, is an attorney as well. And he's got about 9 years trust administration and estate planning experience. And of course, our folks in South Dakota are very experienced in compliance and administrative matters. So pretty robust team. It's a lean team, but a lot of expertise on our side. And again, we rely on the wealth advisors across the footprint to manage that relationship and the investment side of it.
So it really is all about that continuity. I think a lot of misconception maybe surrounds that, or just kind of clarification. Really, you guys are there as a complement to advisors and really a value add to essentially say, you're the one who's driven this relationship for years and years. We want to make sure that continues, and really the trust company format, the private trust company format that we've created really facilitates that.
Correct. Right. It is designed to allow for that continuity, which obviously benefits the wealth advisor, and in that it creates a business model that theoretically is going to stay with them through that next generation. But frankly, for 99% of our clients, we are going to be the best corporate trustee solution they're going to find versus going to your large bank trust company in terms of that level of service.
That makes sense. So Jaden, could you just kind of as an example, maybe walk us through what an engagement with an advisor or with the wealth team, you have maybe a CSA, a wealth advisor, and a senior wealth advisor. What does that kind of interaction look like between you and certain team members, or maybe specifically the client as well?
It can come about in several different ways. There's not necessarily a exact blueprint of how these relationships develop. The traditional way that I would say develops is obviously our wealth advisors will have clients, the grantors, kind of the business owners, the people that are accumulating the wealth. And through that process of working with the wealth advisor, they're going to become very comfortable with that relationship and very satisfied with that level of service and just everything that they're doing with the Mariner Wealth business model.
Right.
And so through Mariner Trust Company, being included as a corporate trustee, successor corporate trustee in the revocable estate plans, during that process, certainly engage us as they're drafting their estate plans or amending their estate plans to have us added into that document. Mm-hmm. Not only will we're going to review it for our appointment language, make sure that's appropriate, but also just to ensure that, we don't see any red flags with the planning and drafting and things like that. And from there, it's a situation where we keep track of our successor appointments. We have a filing system for those, and it helps us kind of gauge our growth and where we need to be in terms of capacity and those types of things on our successor pipeline. Client, becomes incapacitated or passes away, or there's a triggering event where we would step in as trustee, then obviously we're going to assist that wealth advisor to whether that's marshaling assets. I mean, that can be a whole host of responsibilities in terms of what that looks like once we actually do take over that relationship. So that's kind of your traditional way that it would come to us through a successor appointment. Mm-hmm. But we also get a lot of situations where, especially with our higher net worth clients, where they're creating irrevocable estate plans or irrevocable trusts currently for, to pass on business interests, to help address estate tax issues that they may have in their estate plan. Those would be situations where they're coming to us on the front end looking for a corporate trustee to help facilitate that strategy. It's kind of the same scenario. Definitely engage us as early as you can during that process. The worst thing that can happen is we get presented a trust that's been signed by the client, and now they're wanting us to sign as trustee, and it may or may not have some of our required language. There might be other issues with that document, and then we have to go back to that estate planning attorney, and it just isn't a very a smooth onboarding, if you will, for that client, and frankly kind of makes us look a little sloppy. And so engage us early, make sure we get a chance to review those documents, make sure we have a good understanding of what the assets are going to be. That helps us know from a risk perspective what our responsibilities will be on the trustee side, but also from a pricing perspective, helps us just give an accurate quote and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what that's going to cost for us to service that trust account.
Yeah. You mentioned it briefly, but there is specific language within a trust document that we need to have to make sure that Mariner Trust Company assumes that corporate trustee duty once that grantor you mentioned passes away or becomes incapacitated, or essentially when the trust becomes irrevocable. We're going to need specific language and certain phrasing in that document to make sure that we can essentially act as trustee.
Correct. And I have copies of this that I can provide the advisors. I think it's out on
Advisor Toolkit. Should have
so
that.
It's got the most recent or most current version of our sample appointment language. But really, two main things. It's our appointment for as trustee, Mariner Trust Company. We have just a couple of particular things around that. What gets left out the most, which is probably most important to the wealth advisor, is the directed trust language. And so that basically bifurcates that role again from investment management responsibilities and trust administration responsibilities. That's mainly what we see being omitted from the documents in terms of our required language. But then there could be other things in there that we just need tweaked, whether that's situs, various other more, I would call boilerplate type things in some instances, but might be of particular interest or concern for Mariner Trust Company, just to make sure things are worded maybe a little differently.
Great.
And
that makes sense.
So, yeah. Again, just the message is just make sure you're engaging us early on current appointments and when we're going to be serving, so that we can address issues and get things cleaned up on the front end.
Earlier the better. In short.
Correct.
Jaden, you've touched on several points as it relates to this, but could you get a little bit into kind of the difference between your private trust company model and maybe what clients maybe might experience if they're meeting with some kind of other, maybe a bank trustee or something formatted like that?
Right. So when I say private trust company model, it's things like discretionary distributions. That's a big issue with a lot of our trust beneficiaries, and frankly, our clients. They'll come to us and say, when we're gone and our kids and grandkids are beneficiaries of this trust, how easy is it going to be for them to receive money for tuition or to pay medical bills or to go on a trip or whatever that case may be. And so our process is very simple. We don't have a big bureaucracy around discretionary distributions. It's typically a conversation between either me or Nick and that wealth advisor, making a responsible determination of what to do, but not dragging out that process and having to get a committee involved, and that meets every other week or monthly, and just making it as painful as possible for the
streamlining the process,
which is what you're going to see at most corporate trustees. And so we're really the antithesis of that, and so. Again, it's a very simple process from a distribution standpoint. Typically, unless there's something really unusual, you're talking a day or two to get the approval and get those funds out to the beneficiary. That is fantastic. The other thing, whether if we do get into an area that is a little, not as straightforward in terms of what we're going to do from a distribution standpoint, whether that's purchasing real estate or maybe if there's an adverse tax consequence of a distribution, we'll come to a decision, and whether that's doing a loan from the trust or purchasing a house in the trust versus giving funds to that beneficiary to buy it, we're going to look for ways to try to find a good solution that we're comfortable with as a fiduciary, but also the beneficiary is satisfied with the decisions we make. And
sure.
And these aren't drawn out processes or conversations. They're phone calls, with the advisor. We have co-trustees, making sure we're all on the same page. We make a decision and we move on. And we don't drag that out. That's when I say a private trust company offering. That's really what I mean by that.
Yeah.
In terms of just that service level and no bureaucracy and
straight to the point,
trying to
flexibility.
Being pragmatic in the way we approach it. Obviously, we take the fiduciary role seriously, and we're not going to be sloppy on those. In that role, follow the processes that we need to follow, but we're going to make a decision and we're going to move on down the road.
That makes sense. Jaden, one of the things that I think get lots of questions on during whether it's Mariner Week or just in general is kind of pricing and kind of logistics and things like that, as it relates to the trust company. Could you kind of get into that a little bit? I know we have maybe a slide that we can put on screen to kind of give an overview of this, but could you kind of touch on some of that and kind of how that relationship, works with the client for the accounts and whatnot?
Sure. So again, we are not considered a profit center for Mariner. So from a pricing perspective, it's really designed to be more of a break-even operation. Our fees are in addition to what the wealth advisor charges to manage the assets, and we do have to charge fees. So I don't have a way to do like a credit system and this kind of thing. So there has to be fees hitting our balance sheet, and that's mainly from a regulatory standpoint. We're evaluated as standalone business, all these things, and so but again, it's very competitive. For your just typical trust, a non-ILET trust account, it's going to be 25 basis points on the first $5 million in trust assets, 20 on the next 5, and then anything over 10 million of trust assets we'll negotiate, something less than that typically. One caveat with our fee is we have a minimums of $5,000 for the first year and $3,500 for each year thereafter, and that's per trust. That first year fee is comprised of an annual minimum of $3,500 and a $1,500 one-time setup fee. And those are, again, hard costs per trust. I cannot go below that, just the way we're set up in terms of what it costs Mariner to be in this endeavor. And so in terms of real assets, that's 1.4 million of trust assets. If you're above that, you're going to be on that 25 basis points fee schedule. If you're below 1.4 million, you'll be on a minimum fee trust account. With that said, I don't institute a minimum trust size that we will administer and serve as trustee. It's obviously the further we get below 1.4 million, you put our minimum fee on that, and then charge an advisor fee. There's probably some level where it just doesn't make sense for that client in terms of the cost that trust is gonna incur for us to be involved. But I don't make that judgment typically. If it's if it's a $500,000 trust, we charge our minimum, and the advisor is able to charge something and feel like it's worth their while and it's profitable, then by all means we'll look at it.
Right.
For ILETs, it's a little different fee schedule. It's $1,500 a year and a $1,000 setup fee, and it's the same thing. That's per ILET. Those are hard costs. I have to charge those. Can't go below it. If the life insurance trust has multiple insurance policies, then there's some added costs for those reviews and things like that every year. And then within our fee schedule, if you have things like real estate, if we do extensive bill payment, meaning more than 5 bills per month that we're paying or distributing for beneficiaries, there's some added costs that go into that. Mm-hmm. But again, that 3,500 minimum or 25 basis points, et cetera, fee schedules is sort of that standard base fee schedule for Mariner Trust Company.
So pretty consistent within the industry. And as you mentioned, it is pretty competitive as you look to larger banks and trust companies and that sort of thing. It's not unreasonable to ask these amounts is kind of what you're getting at. And I think it's probably advisors can sympathize that there's a lot of legwork going into this on the back end that maybe they're not seeing that your team is putting together. And, essentially fees are to cover those costs.
Correct. Right. Yeah, our fees, frankly, I've not seen a situation where we are not competitive on the fee side. Our trustee fees are very reasonable, and you combine with what we charge with what the advisor is charging, and we're usually competitive, if not less than what our competitors are charging to do the same. So typically they'll have higher minimum thresholds, higher break points, that kind of thing. And you'll see a lot of them, they'll do sort of an all-in fee schedule that's combining investment management and that trust administration.
Sure.
That type of thing. So, but again, it's very competitive. Any trust that we're taking on, we need to review it, kind of to my point earlier. And so, that's going to be one factor obviously we would look at in terms of whether it's a suitable fit for Mariner is market value and those kind of things, just
Absolutely.
like anybody would.
Yeah, definitely. Jaden, kind of one final topic I wanted to make sure that we touched on is that you and Nick, the estate and trust team, you do handle some estate planning types of reviews for clients specifically. Could you kind of touch on what that process is like and kind of give an overview on kind of what the value add behind that is?
Sure. So again, corporate trustee services is kind of our reason to exist, but the other, what I probably spend 50% is what we call estate advisory services. So that can be anything from a phone call, an email. Your clients have, something going on from a trust and estate planning perspective. What are your thoughts? What are some insights we can provide this client? To more in-depth estate plan reviews, to bringing us on board to help develop additional strategies, whether that's from a tax to address estate taxes or income taxes at the estate level, or non-tax situations. You got special needs beneficiaries, or you have second marriages, or these more personal issues in that family. What are some ways we can address that through estate planning? We're often involved in those conversations, and that's certainly one of the reasons we are here as a resource for our Mariner advisors. In terms of formal estate plan reviews, that's certainly something we're happy to help with. Capacity, so it's one of those things. Leverage us wisely on that. We don't certainly want to help with the complex things, and for some of your larger clients, with just Nick and I at the organization, we aren't able to do an estate plan review for every single advisor and all their clients. And so for the simpler, more straightforward estate plans, if you're having trouble getting through those, or you have a specific question, let us know. I don't know that we necessarily have to do an estate plan review for a simple will or a very easy trust situation, but certainly if it's something that's a little more complex and you're needing some help reviewing those documents, reach out to us and let us know what we can do to help. We have an intake form for those requests, and so that's something that is on the toolkit as well. And it just has some basic information in terms of size of the estate, family dynamics, just stuff that's going to help us as we're looking through some context around that estate plan. Typical turnaround time is anywhere from a couple weeks to a month. It just depends on where we are in terms of the pipeline of those and what other things we have going on with the trust company. It is a first come, first serve type situation. If you have an urgent need, I would just encourage you to either call me or call Nick or send us an email and give us the heads up. Otherwise, it just kind of goes into a queue with other review requests that we have, and we just kind of work through it as we get an opportunity to do those. One thing that's very important to keep in mind, these are reserved for Mariner clients, current Mariner clients. We for capacity purposes and really just liability and things like that, we just aren't able to do this for prospects, those types of things. And so we certainly want to help with the prospect phase of a relationship. Give us a call first, see what we can do to help versus just, sending in a review request for a prospect. There's other ways we can help with that prospect without spending a lot of time and resources walking through a review. And it's just not something we're able to really accommodate firm wide. So
sure.
Engage us in that process, but just know that for the actual estate plan reviews and that type of thing, we're really reserving that for Mariner clients.
And I think that's smart. You look at the time required to really put together what we would want to put a good quality product in front of the client. Having done a couple in my day, I can attest that they are a large time commitment. You want to make sure that you're very thorough.
Right.
Every trust document, is slightly different. Even if it's written by the same attorney between two different clients, there might be some minutia there that you want to make sure that you're putting into some kind of a review like that. So certainly a great resource to have, but just being mindful of bandwidth and that sort of thing. That's
well
great.
Said. Yep.
That's great. So Jaden, one of the types of things that I think we get questions on as well, and we'll kind of hit this before we generally wrap up, is what are the types of specific trusts that you manage? There's the alphabet soup of ILITs, CUPERTs, GRATs, CRATs, whatever the case may be. Could you kind of touch on the specific types that you all kind of administer and make recommendations
Sure.
on?
So we really will work with all the acronyms, mainly all of them. It's probably easier to say which ones we won't handle. One are directed IRAs. So those are very technical in terms of ERISA and things like that, and we're just not equipped to handle those. The other are offshore trusts. So anything that's whether that's Cayman Islands or where that may be located, we are not able to administer those. And frankly, we don't need to. That's one of the benefits of South Dakota is we have wonderful asset protection jurisdiction and laws. So our clients don't have to go offshore and paint huge targets on their backs for the IRS. We can get those asset protection and things within our South Dakota charter. The only other one that I'd put an asterisk by are special needs trusts. And so we certainly will look at those, but we review all trust appointments, but we'll definitely take a close look at special needs in particular. There's a couple things with those. They can be potentially high demand. There's some additional liability there often in terms of that beneficiary's needs and the fact that you often have some state agencies that are looking over your shoulder on what you're doing, and they're very specific to every state in terms of the laws and things on those benefits. And so we just need to make sure that we're capable of handling that in terms of who's involved in that document, what other support system does that client have in place, those kind of things. Is it profitable? Is it going to be a profitable relationship for Mariner? And so, again, we definitely, it's not a situation where I say, no, we won't do special needs trust. I think that's what you're seeing at a lot of corporate trustees now is if it has it in the title, they're not going to look at it. We'll look at them and just see if it's a good fit for us. Usually there's a spectrum there. And so just because it says special needs trust in the title doesn't necessarily mean it's a very high need beneficiary that's on benefits and all these kind of things. It could just be what I would call your typical trust beneficiary that just has some limitations personally or financially that is causing them to their parents or grandparents to have reservations about giving them money outright. So they're putting it in trust, and we can certainly handle that. It's more that other end of the spectrum that gives us a little pause and want to make sure we're just getting ourselves in a situation that we can handle. So
that makes sense.
Asterisk with those, but to your point, pretty much everything else, all the other acronyms, we are perfectly capable of administering, or we probably have most of them at this point in terms of ILITs and GRATs and IDGITs and all these different acronyms that you see out there.
That's a new one on me. We can talk offline. Jaden, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with us today. If you have other questions, if advisors have questions or wealth teams have questions, is there a good contact point for you? I know you mentioned there's a form for estate planning reviews, an intake form to streamline the process, but with general questions and things like that, is there a good format to contact you?
Phone's great. Email, just your typical ways of getting in touch with people these days. Those are both fantastic. And it can be really, in a lot of ways, Nick and I are interchangeable. So, if it's something where you feel like you're, for whatever reason, you want to work with Nick on it, feel free to reach out to Nick or me. I don't really have, I'm not territorial on those types of things, or, doesn't have to come to me first or whatever. We work very closely together. And so we're kind of one and the same in a lot of ways. In terms of new business, I'm typically the one that is reviewing that and making the final determination in terms of what we're going to do going forward and acceptance and those kind of things. So, maybe for new business, reaching out to me. Along with the estate review, we do have a form for that, and it's just a way to try to get us thinking in terms of assets and some family dynamics and those kind of things. So
right.
It's just a way to help try to flesh out some of those issues. It's not intended to be a burdensome document that's going to take you out of the advisor hours to complete, but it just helps us really have a little more of a thorough intake process and manage our risk from a fiduciary standpoint.
Well, Jaden, thank you again so much for taking the time to sit down, and thank you for taking the time to tune in. We'll see you on the next class.